Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
The following has been rated PC for politically correct.
Pay attention, you just may learn something.
It's the Sage, Larry Elder.
My next guest is Professor John Eastman of Chapman University. Let's talk about what happened today on the Mueller front. He is apparently accusing Paul Manafort of lying and is recommending substantial jail time, and on the case of Michael Cohen, also recommending substantial jail time.
Well, that's right, and there's a third case we need to be talking about out there as well. A complaint just recently filed with the Department of Justice, that's his officials, by Jerome Corsi, accusing Mueller and his team of pressuring him to lie in order to get a case made against President Trump on collusion. And he filed an ethics complaint. So I think, the theme we see between all three of these cases, Manafort refusing to say things that were going to implicate President Trump, and then Mueller's team threatening now to renege on the plea bargain agreement and go after him. That suggests that this is being an overly aggressive independent or special prosecutor office to try and get stuff that they know is not there. And then you can also read that into the Cohen sentencing memo that was filed a few hours ago up in the Southern District of New York. The prosecutors in the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office are asking for a serious jail time, which would not be the case if the information he had been providing to the special prosecutor's office had been of any use.
So where does this leave us? What's the next step?
Well, look, I think there's a bigger problem here. I have no doubt that Cohen, Manafort, and others probably violated one or other of the laws. One of the problems here is we are starting to get perilously close to the old Soviet notion of selective prosecution, because there are so many laws. There's not a single one of us that doesn't go through the day, in all likelihood, without violating some or another of the federal law. And when you kind of put the intense scrutiny on an individual to see what they've done, rather than on crimes you know about to see who committed them, you run a real risk of selective prosecution and using the law enforcement tools of our unbelievably powerful federal government for partisan political ends. One of the things that Cohen is charged with is lying to Congress. Well, I don't see any similar prosecution against Eric Holder or the IRS officials that we have documented lied to Congress.
Professor, I was watching, I think it was MSNBC, and they were talking about how many convictions the Mueller investigation has gotten so far. And I'm thinking, if that's the definition of a success, why aren't people praising the Whitewater investigation, which I think netted something like 14 convictions, including the then-sitting Arkansas governor at the time?
Well, and they were convictions and indictments dealing with the issue that was actually assigned to that special prosecutor or independent counsel at the time, dealing with the Whitewater land scandal. None of the indictments that Mueller has brought have involved the thing that he was set up in office to do, which is look into those allegations of Russian collusion in the election. They were process crimes, lying to Congress or making misstatements. They dealt with business transactions wholly unrelated to the presidential campaign that some go back decades. And so this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Back at the time of our revolution, one of the charges leveled against King George III is he would deputize prosecutors with general warrants to go and search people to find out if they could find any evidence of a crime. And one of the reasons we have a Fourth Amendment is to stop that kind of thing. And yet, increasingly, it looks like this Mueller investigation is operating on such principles. I've got targets I'm told to look into. I got to scour the earth to find out if they've ever committed any violation of a myriad number of federal regulations or statutes that are on the books that are routinely violated, and normally people are just called into the attention and say, you forgot to file your foreign registration agent form, get it filed. And instead, they're using those kind of things to try and press people to state things that is not true in order to implicate the President of the United States.
Professor, if Trump does not fire Comey, do you and I have this conversation?
I think we do. I think the deep state was looking for ways to go after him, no matter what President Trump did. It's you look at the travel ban litigation. The phony claims that if he had just taken more time to write the executive order properly, the lower courts would have upheld it. Well, we know that's not true because even after they rewrote it, the lower court still struck it down. They are looking for ways to do everything they can to obstruct this president, and therefore to counter the results of the 2016 presidential election.
How important was this unverified so-called dossier in getting the FISA warrant to wiretap Carter Page?
Well, from what we know so far, it was at least one of the primary pieces of evidence put before the the FISA court to get the warrants. And what we know now is that the Department of Justice lawyers, including Rod Rosenstein, who signed off on those warrants, never alerted the FISA court to what they knew to be blatantly partisan activity in generating that scurrilous report. Those are the kind of things that a lawyer at the Department of Justice is ethically obligated to inform the court. And when it's the FISA court, where it's an ex parte proceeding, there's not two sides in that to call your bluff on false allegations like that. They're supposed to be overly scrupulous in giving the FISA court everything that they know.
My guest is Professor John Eastman. Professor, the Trump lawyers and Trump have responded in writing to the special counsel's questions. Do you know what the questions were and what they said?
Well, the list of questions, I believe, was leaked to the New York Times. So I think I don't recall them off the top of my head, but I think we know the substance of them. The Trump lawyers declined to have questions pressed dealing with various obstruction claims, which are themselves also, I think, frivolous. The president has the authority to fire anybody he wants in the executive department, but more dealing with the specific claims of collusion. And I think they answered those questions. And my guess is that the answers were properly vetted by the team of attorneys that the president has working on this to make sure he wasn't inadvertently saying something that was contradictory or what have you. What we do know is after 2 years of more than $40 million public investigation and countless tens of million dollars in private investigations run by a whole series of groups, including most of the major media networks outlets in this country, have not come up with one bit of evidence of collusion with the Russians during the campaign. And that's what the whole pretense of this investigation was for. We knew it was pretense at the outset, and 2 years into it now, it's even looking more like it was pretense.
Are you happy with Trump's current team of lawyers, including and especially Rudy Giuliani?
Well, Rudy Giuliani is a very effective advocate and spokesman and well versed in the criminal process and federal law. So yeah, and then inside the White House, you've got a very adept team of lawyers, including very prominent Emmett Flood. I think they're doing a good job. And then of course Jay Sekulow on the outside as well. These guys are both media savvy and legal process savvy. He's got a good team there, but I don't think he needs it. I mean, you need it to push back against false allegations, but after this amount of time, we've now pretty well confirmed, I think, that what we knew at the outset, that this was just a phony claim, one, either to undermine the presidency, or two, to shield the acts of collusion that actually did occur on the other side of the political aisle. We know, for example, that Hillary Clinton's campaign and also President Obama's leftover campaign funds were laundered through Perkins Coie law firm to pay for this GPS fusion report in order to provide the pretext for spying on the opposite political campaign. I mean, every step of that process is a violation of federal law, and the spying on your political opponents is the thing that brought Richard Nixon down. I mean, this is a monumental scandal, and the sleight of hand that we've exhibited over the last year and a half to try and focus on Trump being the one that did the Russian collusion is I think, intended to insulate the Democrats for the unbelievably illegal conduct that they engaged in.
Professor John Eastman, Professor, as always, thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.